If it's just a Canadian federal transportation energy plan, it will fail. It has to be a pan-Canadian framework where you get 10 provinces and 3 territories buying into the targets. This is still a gap across Canada in all of our provinces and territories and at the federal level. We usually have ministries of energy and energy policies. And then we have ministries of transportation or infrastructure and transportation and infrastructure policies. And in a decarbonized world, the two things need to get married and have children and hold hands and sing kumbaya and have combined integrated policy goals. We still don't have that in Canada today. That would look like Natural Resources Canada, so NRCan, coming together with infrastructure at the federal level and potentially also with Transport Canada, so that you could develop an integrated policy that holds all 3 ministries to account, that is funded or co-managed by all 3 ministries, that addresses clean fuel integration and clean fuel integration of infrastructure into public transit, coaching, trucking, and automotive, including also ferries, shipping, and rail. So if we have transportation married with energy policy in a combined integrated policy framework with specific targets allied to specific incentives and specific punishments through regulatory mechanisms, then we can get much more of this stuff out on the road without the delays that we face in a more discombobulated environment where each of these ministries has their own policy. And that same story holds at every provincial level. I can give you one example of where that gap is very clear. At the federal level, we recognize renewable natural gas as a clean fuel. You can get credits for it. You can make money off it if you produce it. But we don't recognize renewable natural gas as a clean fuel at Infrastructure Canada, where there's money funding zero emissions buses. RNG in a CNG bus is not recognized as a zero emissions or low emissions vehicle that would generate eligible credit in that funding program. So one branch of government says it's a clean fuel, another branch of government that deals with the actual vehicle side says it's not. That disconnect means it doesn't get launched, even though the supply chain's building itself out. The clientele it needs to sell to is not allowed to buy it. That's slowing us down for no obvious reason or no logical reason. The federal government must create a transportation energy policy framework and strategy with specific targets and allied incentives aligned with a spectrum of low and zero carbon fuels. So that would include integrating Natural Resources Canada, Transport Canada, Infrastructure Canada, and the Canada Infrastructure Bank as a financing tool, bringing those 4 parties together to identify specific targets of how many buses, how many coach vehicles, how many trucks, and how many cars do we want to be on the road as a number or a percentage of our overall fleet across Canada by 2030, 2035, 2040, 2045, and 2050. And what fuels will we recognize as achieving the zero emissions or sub-zero emissions targets that we set out, and therefore creating the incentives and the punishments for not hitting those combined targets. To develop this kind of framework also requires that the government doesn't just do it in Ottawa. Without the provinces also buying in and having their own allied transportation energy policy framework to feed into this national picture, it'll be seen as top-down from Ottawa on high down to the provinces, and then we will face resistance at the provincial level, unnecessarily delaying our decarbonization effort. If it's just a Canadian federal transportation energy plan, it will fail. It has to be a pan-Canadian framework where you get 10 provinces and 3 territories buying into the targets, because in doing so, they can pursue it in their own best way based on what their own governments think is the best way to get there. And in exchange, they get money and regulatory support from the feds. If that can be created, we could create the kind of decarbonized transit and transportation landscape that's in the public interest in the same way we have historically created Canadian healthcare.